good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. We are so grateful that you're here. And we haven't seen you since last year, which is wild. So welcome to We Merged. In correspondence with eMerge, Artistic Intersections of the Black Midwest, we've put together a special evening of film featuring filmmakers from our beautiful Ohio. And my name is Candace, and I am one piece of the Within Digital pie. And so we want to welcome you to where we are right now, which is the digital respite. So thank you so much for tuning in. Within Digital is a digital respite engaging Black artists, creatives, and the art curious in curated conversations about art, the creative process, and being Black on the internet in the 21st century. And you can read more about our mission, our vision, and our values at withindigital.net.
Thank you, Candace. Today's fabulous program is the first of the year and a continuation of last year's event, eMerge, which took place in fabulous Cuyahoga County. Tonight will center around some key themes and sources of inspiration for the event and feature films by Robert Banks, Jasmine Golphin, and Cameron A. Granger. But before I speak further about today's program, here's a little housekeeping. Our main boundaries for the digital space, as you can see, are that Midwest Connections are a digital space meant for Black people as a priority. We allow non-Black participants to attend, but advise to allow Black digital members to comment and ask questions during the discourse. We'll try to attend to every comment and question, but if we're unable to do so, we appreciate the support. Archived videos will exist on Within Digital's website, Instagram, and YouTube channel. Additionally, chat boundaries are as follows. Conversations in Midwest Connection will center Blackness and the diaspora, which means any form of racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia of any kind will not be tolerated. Members will be banned from the chat and blocked, if that's the case. Inquisitive and curious discourse are engaged via the option of DMing or commenting in the chat. But if you prefer another method of communication, you can also email your question to yourwithindigital@gmail.com. To support the chat, we will have various select emojis that you can tap on during the conversation. I will paste those below. They are the puzzle piece, the clock, and the computer laptop. Also, I'm Bree, one chunk of the Within Digital pie.
Thank you, Bree. And I missed this slide, but this was our event, eMerge, that happened back in October in Cleveland, Ohio. And it was a really, really great time. And if you were there, I'd love you to shout yourself out in the chat right now. And if you weren't there, then you missed out on a really great event, but you're here in the digital space where we are bringing that same spirit and that same energy back online. So let's get into it. So following the screening portion of this program, the panelists will be in dialogue with Bree and I, but we encourage you to reflect on the films as well and engage with us in the chat box. As you can see, we really love to connect with everyone in the chat. And additionally, there will be time for a few questions after the films are presented, so please feel free to drop them into the chat or Q&A box at any point during the program. And as you respond, reflect, and connect, we request that within this space we share that you show kindness, compassion, and respect towards our panelists and your fellow attendees. And lastly, at the end of the program, we'll put in the chat a brief survey. So I hope you can take a moment to complete it before signing off. And now I'm going to tell you about our featured filmmakers for tonight. So first is Robert C. Banks Jr. And Robert C. Banks Jr. was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio in 1966 and has attended Cleveland Institute of Art and Cleveland State University and has also served in the U.S. Air Force. Inspired by his father, Banks is an experimental filmmaker, cinematographer, and teacher of filmmaking and photography at numerous colleges and universities. Banks's films have been screened at numerous prestigious film festivals and art institutions, both domestically and abroad, such as Sundance Film Festival, South by Southwest Film Music Festival, International Film Festival Rotterdam, Museum of Modern Art, Robert Flaherty Film Seminar, Chicago Underground Film Festival, and Ann Arbor. He was a recipient of numerous awards, including Filmmaker of the Year at the Midwest Filmmakers Conference, and his film retrospectives have been featured at the BBC British Short Film Festival, the Cleveland Cinematheque, and the Walker Center for the Arts. One of Banks's best-known works is the 1992 short film X, the Baby Cinema, which chronicles the commercialization of Malcolm X's image and legacy, and we'll be seeing that film tonight. Some of his other films include Motion Picture Genocide, which we will also be watching tonight, My First Drug, The Idiot Box, Outlet, Goldfish and Sunflowers, AWOL, Autopilot, and Don't Be Still, all of which were shot and edited on 16 and 35 millimeter film. Several of his short films have been added to the private collections of institutions such as the Yale University Film School and the Walker Center for the Arts. Most recently, Banks has completed his first 35 millimeter feature film, Paper Shadows, which was 7 years in the making. So yay, welcome, Mr. Banks. Next, we have Jasmine A. Golphin. Jasmine A. Golphin is a visual artist and currently the Associate Artistic Director at Maelstrom Collaborative Arts, an interdisciplinary and intersectional arts venue. Her artistry includes photography, filmmaking, live performance, virtual reality and projection design, exploring themes of existentialism in relationship to technology and societal marginalization. In 2022, she was the first apprentice in Dobama Theater's Focus program, leading to projection design work on Cinderella at Tuts, Matilda Jr. at Brooklyn Music School, Thurgood and King James at CPH. Jasmine's 2023 essay, Black Woman Unintentionally in Tech, was supported by the Next Web Seed Grant, an initiative of New Ink and Meta Open Art. Her 2022 VR experience, Facebook Land, was supported by Spaces, the Satellite Fund. Her latest short film and art installation, Welcome to the Panopticon, which we'll be watching tonight, was supported by Dobama Theater, Cleveland Camera Rentals 2024 Rental Credit Grant, and the Foundation for Contemporary Arts Emergency Grant. So everyone, please welcome Jasmine in the chat. And then finally, we have Cameron A. Granger. Cameron A. Granger is Sandra's son and came up in Cleveland, Ohio. Inspired by the rigorous archival and homemaking practices of his grandmother Pearl, Granger uses his work as a means to quote his communal and familial histories into new, not just potential, but inevitable futures. He's an alumni of Euclid Public Schools, Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, and the Studio Museum in Harlem Artist in Residence Program. And you can visit the links of all of these artists and see more of their work. Oops.
Okay. Wait, is my audio good? Okay. Today we'll be viewing 4 films: X, the Baby Cinema, MPG, Motion Picture Genocide, Welcome to the Panopticon, and Heavy as Heaven. These films navigate themes of surveillance and self-policing, memory, and spatial presence. Media is both a force of preservation and destruction, and Blackness as an omnipresent continuum moving across time, technology, and the gaze that shapes our realities. They explore the tension between visibility and erasure, between imposed narratives and self-authored truths. Through shifting temporalities, layered soundscapes, and experimental approaches to storytelling, these works expose the fragility of constructed realities, whether shaped by the state, the media, or the spaces we inhabit. In doing so, they invite us to consider how we navigate systems designed to watch, define, and contain us, and how we might carve out portals to something beyond. And now, I invite you to enter the respite with us today.
I don't know about you, but right now I'm just like, whew. I felt like we just went on a journey together, and I feel forever changed by that journey. I don't know about y'all. We're loving the chat, love. Yes. Let's just give it up in the chat for all of our amazing films. So now we're going to move into our time of conversation, and we have 4 questions in 35 minutes. So panelists, it's a go time, and we're first going to start off how it's going to work is I'm going to ask, well, I guess we technically have 5 questions. Sorry. We have an intro question, and then we'll have our individual questions. So the first question, everyone answer, and then we'll have questions for each specific featured filmmaker. So my first question, the way we always kind of enter our space together is, how are you entering the respite today? And whoever wants to go first, maybe I'll ask Mr. Banks if you would like to go first.
Can I go last?
Okay, you can go last.
I am entering the respite with a lot more joy in my heart than I was expecting today. It's been a week, you know, and this has been affirming in a lot of ways.
I love to hear that.
I'm also feeling similar to Jasmine, feeling really grateful for the space, excited to be here, see some familiar faces, meet some new folks. Um, I'm feeling very soothed and grounded right now. Yeah, excited to talk films.
Beautiful, thank you.
Pretty much the same here. What we just saw kind of just sort of was hypnotic. That Cameron's piece was like, so it's the thing is, when you watch films like that, you need time to let it sink in. So it's like this little bit of a transition. So, but luckily, yeah, I think after seeing that and after, I'm just feeling, it's all coming back. But no, I'm inspired more than ever. So when I see stuff like that, it really gets to me. So I'm really enlightened. So it's a blessing and a half right now with you guys. So excellent. I'm still letting it sink in.
Yeah, maybe we do need that like meditative, just reflective moment. Cause I feel the same way. There was just so much in each film that I was really sitting with, and after watching these, multiple times, new things are hitting me at different points. So really just beautiful work, and just first just want to celebrate the talent that, as somebody in the chat is putting Bree's famous quote, "The Midwest shall rise again," and we are witnessing, just the 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 Midwest at its gloriousness right now. So we're gonna, enter into our conversation time, and first question goes to Mr. Banks. And the question that we have, there's so much that we could talk about with every single film. And so it was really hard to kind of pick a particular thing to reflect on in each person's piece. But we wanted to talk about, X, the Baby Cinema was released in 1992, right? Which was 33 years ago at this point. And so in what ways do you see the commercialization of Black leaders and public figures persisting within today's art world and their broader kind of cultural systems? And then secondly, to connect it to MPG, motion picture genocide, that film also examines the power of media to shape narratives, sometimes to the point of destruction. And so how do you see these forces, media, commodification, and erasure, working in tandem, particularly in how Black figures and histories are represented or manipulated? So there's a lot in that question.
All right, let me see if I'm smart enough to answer that one. That's a heavy one. Okay, I guess you got to put it in context. Dumb question. Is there everybody here in the panel is under the age of 35, I guess? How old are you, Jasmine? So you're over 35? Okay, so you were around when you were a little girl.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So, all right. So you got to put things in perspective of that time frame. That was I started on that film back in 91. And it was mainly because at that point, there was this resurgence within the community and outside in the mainstream in terms of the whole identity thing and, what they're calling woke now and all this stuff. Well, woke's always been around, but anyway. But back then, that was, I want to say, unofficially, we were looking at as mainstream, high-end media was like coming full circle with music videos and advertisements and everything. And then, of course, everybody was like, we have our new film messiah, Spike Lee and all that, which is cool. And I was a big Spike Lee fan back then. And I guess you could say, growing up watching a lot of TV and a lot of advertisements and commercials and everything, along with watching a lot of short documentaries and stuff in our neighborhood library and everything, I sort of had a different perspective of media back then. So when I made that film, that was unofficially me poking fun at the fact that, okay, all of a sudden I'm getting this vibe that everybody thinks that they're militant, they know this, they know that. And of course we got Spike Lee making this big budget Hollywood movie, which I thought was good. I didn't think it was a great film, But I knew immediately they were going to milk this and really turn this into something that I don't really think it was meant to be explored in terms of the legacy of Malcolm Little and with the whole Nation of Islam and all these things that happened with the civil rights movement and everything. And so it just seemed like all of a sudden, within a few weeks of this marketing tidal wave, everybody was militant, everybody was hardcore, everybody was this, that, they were wearing the hats, and these were all walks of life. And I'm just thinking, what the hell happened here? And then you would ask people about certain aspects of that, and they were like saying, well, I'm just supporting the cause, man. You know, it's like, okay, well, you know, so it was just getting to the point where I was getting really annoyed by that. And this was, keep in mind, this was like in early 91. And so I started screwing around with this film immediately after another film I made before this. And it was about, it was called Eyes. And it was about cosmetic beauty in the Black community and all that. And it's that whole thing. And it was a similar film using cutouts and drawing on film methods and everything. But I wanted to go a step further with this film, even though I had no money when I made it. I had my old Bolex 16 millimeter, and I had a bunch of black leader and clear leader film, and I started compiling just clips and whatnot. And I just started scribbling on the frames, just things that were coming to my mind in terms of, you know, commercialism and everything with consumerism and how everything has to be a fad and a style. And I made a prediction that a year after this film is released and everybody forgets about it, the Malcolm X film, outside of the people that really dug it, there was going to be a huge stockpile of X hats and memorabilia and jewelry and gear and stuff in the thrift stores. And sure enough, it was. So it was sort of my way of sort of exploring about why is it that we need something like that to get us in tune with who we are in terms of our culture and our legacy. This stuff should be 24/7. And I know back then the public schools were a little bit more intense, but when we were coming up, we knew about Martin Luther King and Marcus Garvey and what's it, Booker T. Washington. We knew our history. There were a lot of teachers that went out of the way to give us that, even though it wasn't considered proper back then. But there was more about that then than it is now. And it just seems that, okay, technology is getting better. This was just before the internet became the new thing, all this stuff. So I don't know. I just, at that point back then, I was just getting annoyed about how everybody is just so in tune to stuff, but they're not really not in tune with it. So this sort of ties into the 2 films later, 3 films later, that's Motion Picture Genocide, which was in the same vein of X the Baby cinema. But that was pretty much celebrating the aspect of exploitation in mainstream media, because that film, I started production on that in 95, 96. And that was the centennial, the 100-year centennial of cinema. And I just, once again, reflected on the fact that, yeah, you have this legacy of violence towards people of color, women, other minorities, all these stereotypes and all these things that we grew up watching. And of course, you know, a lot of people, you know, they got to have their sensationalism. So people being shot up, blown up, cut up, raped, whatever. So, and so the idea was to make a film that was a mock trailer on acid, so to speak, or what I call like a collage graffiti of animation and whatnot, paying tribute to all that stuff that I saw. So, and the whole idea of having a soundtrack being manipulated and everything in this, both of these films, everything was done on all analog equipment, all cut and splice, all on my hands, cutting and splicing and looping and all that stuff. So it was pretty intense. But I wanted to put as much physical labor into trying to express this mindset. And unofficially, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I was predicting anything, but you know, we had the Rodney King thing that was before that. But you know, the stuff that came many, many years afterwards, like we're at now with the whole pre and post George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Tamir Rice, all these things that everybody's making a big deal about now. Well, we were pissed off about that back in the 90s, but for some reason, unless it was mainstream media highlighting it, it wasn't really being expressed. And only a handful of other filmmakers I can remember back then were also touching upon this. And a lot of them were doing it in more or less of a conventional documentary, formal type thing. But I wanted to make something that was really abstract, in your face. And I was paying tribute to also the filmmakers that I loved that were real radical, like Norman McLaren, people like that, Harry Smith. People kept making a Stan Brakhage reference, but there really wasn't much. I mean, I like Stan Brakhage, but I was more or less, I wanted to find a way of getting young people's attention. These films were meant to be aimed at younger people that had a short attention span because the whole music video thing. A lot of people compared X the Baby cinema to Shut 'Em Down by PE, Public Enemy. it got compared to that. So no, I mean, the initiative was to take a topic that I just felt that was being either misunderstood or misguided towards how it's being presented, and just turn it upside down and just really just mess it up a bit. And it's just weird seeing those films now because yeah, it's that was back in the 90s. And so I don't know.
Yeah, no, that was really good, and I love how you always, bring it, like you always contextualize your work in a really helpful way, and so I really appreciate that. I'm curious if what the response, I'm sure you show these films
Mhm.
now as you showed them back then. I'm curious if the response to them is different between the different time periods and how that has been.
Probably now more so than back then. Back then, as far as like the X the Baby cinema, I caught some flack from a lot of Spike Lee fans about that. I mean, I did several big screenings with that film, and I would get up there and do a little Q&A, and there would be a handful of people be like, "Yo, man, why you dissing Spike like that?" That's all I kept hearing. And I even had grade school kids. They were trashing me also because of that. Now remember, this is the early mid 90s, so if you said anything that was kind of questionable about Black filmmaking back then, you were like a sellout. And it's like, no, it had nothing to do with that. But the funny thing was that audience, it was at Athens, at Ohio University, Athens. I did a screening down there. I remembered it was for an all Black film festival, actually. And I remembered this one dude, he got up there and he was one of the many people questioning why I was like doing that. And then I just asked the entire audience. It was a packed house in this auditorium, and it was like 2 years later. This was in 94. That film came out in 92. And I asked, when the Spike Lee film came out, how many of you guys wore your gear? You wore your hats and your shirts and your jerseys and your jewelry and all that. And everybody, the whole place raised their hand. And I said, okay, great. It is April of 1994. How many of you guys still sporting that gear? Huh? Raise your hand. A small minority, maybe like out of like 300 people in the place, only like 10, 15 people had their hands up. And I said, there you go, I rest my case. Then the same dude asked me, yo, man, but it's out of style now. I'm like, thank you, case in point. And I walked off the stage. And that was what you called a mic drop back then. But I was like, because no, they were ready to crucify me at first. And I was like, the hell with it, so, but no. And then over the years, people just sort of got the message. And it wasn't so much just Malcolm X, but it was, once again, in general, it's just the community tends to sort of take this stuff for granted. Like what's going on now with all this crap with the DEI stuff and everything, and people not voting and not taking things seriously and all that. I mean, it's just same misinformed, shallow nonsense within the community that just people, I don't know what it is. I mean, so yeah, I mean, that film, and then with Motion Picture Genocide, similar thing. A lot of people were like, well, what are you being a film snob for? What are you being, you don't like Terminator? I was like dude, I had a laundry list of things about action movies that I love, especially big budget movies, but there was just as many bad things that I didn't like. When you're a kid, you're not informed and you're not really balanced in terms of how things work in society or in the law or, being in the military, I can tell you some stuff. It's like, it's easy to look at that from your TV screen or a movie screen. And so when you see these things and all these stereotypes and the whole myth about, oh, if the Black man's with these white dudes, he's the first one's going to get killed. It's just all these things that you're raised with. I don't know if they raised you guys in that, but that was an inside joke back in the day. So it's like, when people see a car wreck or a fight break out, people want to stop and look. And nowadays they're going to take their phones out and they want to start shooting it, and it's just, all of that was going through my head back then. If people had the means to whip out a camera to capture an incident, whatever, they would do it.
Mhm.
And sure as hell, people are doing it now more than ever. I mean, it's like I tell respectively, I think social media is the beast with a million eyes, because no matter where you go, you probably can walk 15, 20 feet. There's a camera somewhere in your vicinity, or somebody's wearing one. It's in their car or it's in their phone or whatever. There's cameras everywhere now. And it's all about that brawl, that dogfight, some dude beating up his girlfriend, or some girl, two women beat somebody else, or someone causing trouble, or it's all sensationalized violence and mindless stuff that's just keeping us back, especially all the stereotypical stuff. And for a while, yeah, I would go on YouTube and just watch some of this stuff just to take notes or to try to do found footage type stuff. And then it's like, it gets depressing after a while. And you wonder, not just as a community, but as a society, what have we turned into? Because film in itself, or the media, is such a young medium. Think about it, it's not that old compared to other media. So And at the same time, it has taken us back maybe a couple thousand years in terms of our humanity to the point where we're borderline savage because people do anything for the camera, or if they're triggered by a camera, they do things. And, you know, whether it's the news, whether it's now with all these different podcasters doing their shows on YouTube or TikTok, whatever. I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, so ironically, yeah, when I was making that film, I was thinking about the future of where we are going as a society and as a culture and as a species, because we are dominated by these things that trigger us, sex and violence. And especially if it's at the expense of the community or certain genders, you know, people don't care. They want to get their cheap thrills, and, you know, they get off on that, you know, so that's what those films were.
Yeah. And I definitely just see the things that you were exploring back then, seeing those modern like versions of the exploitation, like it's just in a different, you know, format, in a different lens, so to speak. And so
and it never I mean, it never changed. To me, everything in terms of mainstream media, there's variations of exploitation, whether it's network news, whether it's music videos, whether it's TV, I don't know, there's going to be some level of, we got to make sure we have that because people want to see that. It's just, when you work around these production executives, man, the stuff that these people spew out because they say you have to have that, it's just like, man, it's like, dude, where are the morals, man? Whereas, you know, can't we just set a little standard of decency, some moral decency? But no, it's like, you know.
Yeah. And I think what you just said about phones and just like the camera and everything being everywhere leads me to our next question that I'll have Bree talk about with Jasmine's film, Welcome to the Panopticon, because literally what you're describing, just that kind of like constant surveillance, sure, that is like proliferated with all technologies. So really appreciate that, and just seeing those films and the physical production and hearing about that is really cool.
Yeah, if you have any tech questions, I can answer that too. But we want to get to Cameron and Jasmine. So,
well, the eyes of it all is what I'm thinking about now. The eyes.
The eyes.
For Jasmine, welcome to the Panopticon. My question is, can you describe a little bit or talk about the decision to splice between these scenes that you have of like deeply introspective moments between like people of different generations and these really absurd moments that kind of tie back to advertising. I'm curious about the contrast between media messaging and these like very tender moments of conversation, and like what drew you to putting those together? What drew you to merging these?
Well, great question. Thank you for asking. You know, it's funny because I'm trying to give you like a more technical answer, but I really was just chasing a feeling. The core story, the story of the two women in the park, is actually from a feature-length script. It's actually like an additional scene I haven't written yet for that script, and I was like, oh, I can do it for this story and use it here. And in that, I don't know, I think what I was trying to capture was the feeling of all of this going on at once. And it does to me feel like a TV show. So there's commercial breaks and there's ever presence of something. There's an anxiety, there's a tension, there's an influence of opinion, and it's got a rhythm to it. It's got there's a pattern to it. You know, when you're scrolling your phone, you do it at certain times of the day. When you're watching TV, you know, oh, a commercial break's going to happen at this moment, this moment, and this moment. And there's a feeling in that I just really wanted to capture. And I knew the design of the installation, for those that don't know, I call this the like 2D version of a 3D experience. The full installation is a 360 hexagonal panopticon with the film being projected across the entire space. And so I was really playing with like the full version. You're standing in the middle in the guard position, and the story unfolds around you, sometimes all at once, sometimes bits and pieces. And so like some of those ghosts, for instance, would play if like if your like line of sight is like 180 degrees, the ghost would be at like 190 behind you. Just to like both encouraging people to move around the space, but also that's the tension, that's the anxiety, that's what that feels like. That there's always something. I'm not doing something right. Someone's got the best next advice. Someone's got the best next idea for what I should be doing. And it just I didn't know how else to capture that feeling without bringing in the paranormal. I didn't know how else to capture that feeling without it feeling like something like a pattern we're kind of used to, the kind of thing of a commercial break and that escalation that happens in a TV show, but the escalation happens across a commercial break rather than the show itself. But all of that was just me trying to like, can't afford therapy, so we gonna put it on the page. Like,
That is fabulous. And it reminds me of something from
ooh,
Merge,
ooh.
Perfect Intersections of the Black Midwest, the zine. In an essay that I was talking about relationship to the land of the Midwest, there's a quote from Legacy Russell speaking about errors and glitches and these breaks in our like consciousness, where she says, errors, ever unpredictable, surface the unnameable point or the wild unknown. To become an error is to surrender to becoming unknown, unrecognizable, unnamed. New names are created to describe errors, capturing them and pinning down their edges for examination. All this is done in an attempt to keep things up and running. This is the conceit of language where people assume if they can find a word to describe something, this is the beginning of controlling it. You're trying to control your subconscious.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, I like that. I
oh,
like that.
if you got that in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Yes. But just to respond to that, I think ooh, big thought. I'm gonna try to put it into words. Let's see if I can do it. The idea of the era of the error, the disruption. Capitalism does not like disruption. It does not like an error. It does not like a mistake. If you're making a product, it has to be sold and made the same way every time. You go to McDonald's here, it's the same McDonald's over there. So an error, a disruption, something that is abnormal, does not fit, does not have a place in our society. And what I was born a Black woman who is much more of an error to this system, right? Like this idea of who we are and what we should be. And so, I mean, I think it's funny because I've never heard it that way, but it's clicking into like my default sometimes when I edit or if I'm doing something, with my photo series like Vapor Bell, it's all this disruption of what is normal. And I think because I feel that kinship and that similarity of, yeah, I am the disruption. I am the mistake. I do not fit in this system. I am not easily sold. I fit here, and that this is the space I am creating for that. And I think a glitch honors that. I had never thought about that, but this is she's taking notes.
You're interested. You're interested. That's what we do.
I didn't know if you had a follow-up after that. Sorry. I was like, I think that was definitely as Mr. Banks said, mic drop moment. Yeah, I really love that. And sorry, I had a glitch. So we're gonna move to Cameron. So I have a question for you, Cameron. In your film, you make note that, when we get to the end of the film, at the point where, we learn that the house is no longer going to be standing, you note that there's a responsibility to maintain the house, even if the house no longer stands and you yourself become the home. So my question is, how does memory reconstitute itself for you? Like, what is when you think of the architecture of memory, what do you think about?
a good question. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay. I think, well, yeah, so a lot of my work is sort of concerned about how these physical, like these places we call home, hold memories when the people that made them aren't there anymore. These like sort of physical and psychic links to place. And so in that, I guess I've been thinking about memories as like a portable kind of thing, and how like they sort of move alongside of people. Um, you I think a lot about like the Great Migration as this big sort of like movement of memory from the south to the north, and how these like, yeah, it's like these shifting points on a map or something like that, you know. There's, I think of how we pass memories amongst each other too, you know, that can be in the form of objects, photographs, images, things like that, but also just like stories. You know, I learned in a lot of ways, I feel like I learned more about my grandma after her passing than I did when she was around. She was a very like kind of quiet, private person. But there's so many stories that I've heard from my aunties, my mother, um, grandfather, all these people, just sharing different stories about this person that I never knew. And it created this really beautiful, this like, even this really beautiful, like, even fuller image of her. I think we're a very like, you know, Black folks have a, uh, we're people like a storytelling people, you know, the griot. I think there's a sort of, for me, and why I'm often make work about where I come from and the places that I come from is because I think I feel a responsibility to like share stories and histories of like my people of my communities, because we have to like pass these things down um amongst each other, preserve them, hold them. um yeah, so I think it's like the memory is this like portable thing, but you have to like steward it, you have to hold it, you have to kind of like nurture it, and protect it so that it can like continue on after you.
Yeah, that's really good. And I like, through the film that we see this kind of the transference of memory. Like we just watch that happen from the house, like the home and all the different uh artifacts and elements until into the moment where the main character is like leaving, and you just kind of sense like what's behind them is all of that, but what's ahead of them is themselves and like the unknown. And yeah, I just found that scene really powerful, the way you close it, and then the house kind of has that final word. One thing that I wrote about in the emerge artistic intersections of the Black Midwest zine by Within Digital that everyone can download and look at, is about the interiority that I feel like Black Ohioans in particular possess, and just like the space, that like inner realm, that inner space, that people use and go to when they need to be reminded, or they need to like go into a space of remembering in memory, and find whatever is in that memory that they need to carry forward and honor, like as you do in your work. And there's a quote in here somewhere that I'm trying to find, and Bree might need to help me out, but there are just, I think that our literary heroes, I'm thinking of just like how art is that space where the memories that we hold within our bodies can be expressed outwardly. And yeah, I'm just curious about how, like maybe a little bit about the process of what you did. Did you like sit in like, I don't know where the location of the film was, but did you sit in like a particular location to recall certain memories, or were you looking at old photos, or just, I wonder, how did you personally reconstitute the memory?
Yeah. Well, so that the film was shot at my grandparents' place. So the house, so my grandma passed away in 2017. That at the house currently my granddad and my auntie still live there. So I went up with a few friends to shoot the project with my homie Dom, who was in the film, and then my friends Jeffrey and Kendra, who shot the film. Um, we went up just for a night to run through everything. But I mean, I guess like what I was thinking a lot about just how much again, like this like psychic connection to the place, like how sort of much on like a sort of mental, emotional level, the space has shifted for me, but on a physical level, it feels very much like exactly the same as when she was there. Like, um, down to the point where there's like a to-do list, like a to-do list that she had left that's on the fridge still, you know. And so I was thinking just a lot about how like the dissonance there. I didn't really I was still living in Columbus at the time, so I hadn't been back to the place too much um as I was working on it. I kind of was just it was a lot of just working from like what the place felt like in my brain, I think. Um and yeah, like just thinking through that weird like schism that was happening there. So and then I sort of go in and am writing this uh yeah, like this conversation between the two characters, the house and Dom, and the house is voiced by my friend Shayla Miller, another Cleveland friend. But I was thinking like, okay, there's like of these like spatial memories of the place. We go from the bedroom, we go to the living room, we go to the kitchen. These like, okay, if these like spaces could talk, what would they say? What's transpired here? What is this sort of like, I guess like this haunting feeling that I feel here when I come back home. So I was trying to like create a like actual like manifestation of that. And then also like, okay, like you have this space that is witness to all these different like facets of your life, your loved ones' lives, and then what kind of happens there after you leave or someone leaves, right? Like, because the house is still holding that. So, like, what happens to all that, like, presence, weight, history, memory? Again, like, this is a memory that has not been, I guess, like, stewarded very well. It's been turned away from. The character is very much kind of like retreated into himself and only sort of return in this moment of like intense crisis. And it's kind of forced to like unpack this stuff.
Yeah, I really um love how we were able to experience kind of all those tensions and emotions and concurrencies
Mm.
through the experience of the film. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. So our last question will be a group question, joint slate. Um, Looking broadly, thematically, and I will ask it now. In each of your films, voices play a recurring role, whether through repetition of phrases, layering of voices, or communication with outside beings. Black people have a complex and often fraught relationship with film and the moving image. From histories of misrepresentation to the ways we've used these mediums to reclaim narrative power, I'm wondering, how do you see the role of voices, both literal and figurative, in shaping your works?
I'll hop on. Um, Voices. Okay, so literally is maybe the easier question for me to answer. Again, it was a building that cacophony of chaos, and having that juxtaposed to not just voices, but like that commercial voice that I'm selling you something, this will solve your problem. Authority in comparison to the long stretches of nature and that quiet of like and in between that I was mixing like the static of television with the rushing of the water just to bring it all together. So like in that case literally it was like okay, voice is human and like trying to control, and then that brings to like yeah, in my mind it was like almost like a spectrum of like if the voices were one end of like hyper control, nature was like fully letting go of that control and like exploring that throughout the story. In terms of like voices on a more like metaphorical or broader sense, um I think it's such an interesting question. um Come back to me. Let me think about that a little bit more. Actually, I have a thought, but let me articulate it in a minute.
Um, let me yeah, you got me. I'm trying to think too about this. But I mean, I think like I guess yeah, we'll talk on a formal level first. I mean, there's only one like speaking voice in my film, and it's the house. And me and Shayla worked really hard on trying to like dial that voice in. I wanted it to be this um voice of someone that is like very like clearly wounded, but also like they're wounded and they're angry because they're wounded, but also at the same time, it's coming from this place of like love and loss and just like pain, right? Um, and so we really worked hard to try and like figure out what that looks like. It's this sort of I guess for lack of a better word, like a maternal sort of voice, but I think more of just like a yeah, like yeah, it's this sort of like all enveloping kind of like soothing voice too, but it builds and it drops. And I think something I was trying to but it's also like just another instrument and kind of like the larger like fabric of the film sound as well. I really wanted it to feel like you're being swallowed up by like something that's bigger than you, a monster, a body of water, something like that. And there's those like really like kind of grody shots of like a beating heart and lungs, and those are like animal organs. The whole like the film is like when you the actual like the film like IRL it plays and on it's like this 3 channel film that plays in this like frame of a house. It's like 100 square feet that I built for a show in Columbus. And it has this like big subwoofer uh hovering over it, so you kind of like feel a lot of that rumbly bass in your body and stuff. um so yeah, I was also trying to think of it as like a as an instrument too, something that has this like I guess like weight to it, you know. And when it speaks it feels like it kind of like it shakes you, it makes you scared, but also like it's also a little like seductive and mesmerizing and sort of pulls you in too. um so yeah, we were trying to like find a voice that sort of like could encompass all of that, you know. Um, but then there's the character of Dom who doesn't verbally speak in the film too. And for him, like we were thinking of like, okay, you have this for me at least, I'll speak for myself personally, like there oftentimes like when I feel certain things in my body and I'm totally unable to articulate what those things are. And for me, like I think grief as I experience it is also like often one of those things. Like it's hard for me to like verbally place a lot of what I'm feeling in those moments when I have those waves. And so like this character is only able to talk through this like inner monologue that's happening with the house, who's able to feel it. And so he's like, but when he speaks with his words, he's sort of like rendered mute in the way. So you have those sort of two like um I guess, contrast happening there with the voice.
That was a beautiful thought. Just want to fill the space there and say both of those responses are great. Yeah, Mr. Rings, did you have anything to add on that? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. Okay. I may as well just play off of what Jasmine and Cameron said. I'm more or less into the text. I know it sounds weird because in both films you see a lot of text. We were gonna have voiceovers originally in the X to Baby cinema, but I decided, no, let's just leave it simple. I just wanted it to be the images and the text and the collage. But for MPG, the text, I wanted, like what you guys were saying about your pieces, you wanted to hear the words in a more authoritative, but also in a like a hypnotist sort of thing, which is what ads and trailers do anyway to some degree. And the whole idea was to take that and just magnify it 10 times over. So like when Jasmine was saying, like in her space where she has the piece presented, you hear the sounds, or like Cameron says with the woofer. MPG, both those films played in theaters back in the day. MPG, especially when you heard it in a theater with a nice surround system with a high-end Dolby 5.1 system, even though it was all mono, the fidelity and the low end was high. So that heartbeat was shaking the theater, and it was boom, 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 boom. And of course, you had all the crazy strobic images from the scratch on the film stuff. And yeah, it was like an extreme sensory overload on a very grassroots level. And the whole idea was, yeah, let the text and the voiceover sort of carry that, but in a more metaphysical, figurative type ingredient as opposed to being literal. I mean, it was, in certain cases it was literal, but a lot of movie trailers back then especially, they would over exaggerate things. So my thing was, let's just over exaggerate that on steroids, but still play up the whole nature of the text as well as the subtext of the audio from the voiceovers, because those were like sound bites that I got from like vintage trailers from the 60s and 70s. And I just really wanted to just exaggerate that with the weight of the other tracks from, depending on the venues you've seen it at. Every other venue I remember seeing it in, I kept saying, wow, that sounds really great. Then there were some venues where the sound system wasn't that great, but it was still effective. But for the most part, yeah, the whole idea was to really make this over the top creative, not creative, I mean like a exaggerated controlled chaos with words and verbal expression as well as written text, and sort of, and they're sort of visually overlapping with the actual audible component there. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but that was the whole nature, trying to, when I do soundtracks for films, like my films, I always go for that. Every other film I made since then, I've done a similar technique, different technology maybe, but same principle. But yeah, I think we're all on the same page with that. 'Cause I think we like the idea of just, you can feel it, like what Cameron said, you feel these things. And when you're actually making it and constructing it, you're like trying to maintain that instinct, that intuitiveness with that. Because yeah, I'm big into sounds, found sounds, ambient noises. I'm all about that. That's a big thing with me.
The only thing I wanted to add, because I just finally put it all together, is that I think part of the reason I wanted different voices to specifically be saying like these anxieties in that commercial is to like ground us in, and again, same thing we've all kind of been saying, grounding us in the sense that like that we're not alone in these anxieties, that to hear all of these different voices and coming in all of this direction and to feel it, not just hear it, but to feel it, like part of what I wanted, I don't, for as like disturbing as the imagery can be, or like or tension filled as the imagery can be, I didn't want people to leave with like the feeling like things are hopeless. I wanted to end on like a hopeful note in some way. And so like having that, like not just one authoritative voice of anxiety, but like this is what all our voices sound like this, and it is a lot, and we are feeling it, and it's not just in your head. That I felt like was really important, and that was, I was like, I know I have a way of saying that, I just needed a second, so thank you for giving me that second.
You can have all the seconds. Yeah, thank you all for your responses and your yeah, just the threads between each of the things that you're saying, because I definitely felt immersed in each film in a different way, and just appreciate the attention and craft and that experience as a viewer in what you do as a filmmaker, you know, how you are being so intentional, particularly was just, I think I was just so impacted by the sound in each film in a different way, and that was something we really wanted to talk about. So now is our time for audience Q&A. So audience, it's your time to shine. Wonderful audience, our gigabytes as we call you. If you have a question, please just throw it in the chat, and our lovely filmmakers are here to answer. And it can be about the films themselves, about their creative process, practice, any other things you want to discuss. So ask away.
While we wait, can I ask like a technical question of the other filmmakers?
Yeah, please.
I would love, so for Robert, I would love to know more about like the process of animation. I adore animation and I don't have the patience for it. Like to make it happen, I love it so much, and I love I love animation, and I know it's because I don't have the patience to actually sit down and animate anything. And with Cameron, I would love to know more about well, first off, side note, I have that clock. I used to have that clock in my house growing up, and it was really weird seeing it again. I was like, oh, okay. Loved it, loved it. I guess like I'm really curious about. Yeah, you hit it already. I guess I just really want to hear more about the house. I love like I totally understood what that was. I've definitely been in communication with a space. And I guess like, and I appreciate you navigating how to capture that feeling. So I guess, yeah, any more thoughts you have on that, I would love. So those are my questions as we wait for more.
Oh, me go first? Me go first?
You're muted. Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
All right, I'll go first. Um, yeah, the house. I mean, yeah, I guess like again, like thinking about these like traces that we leave on a space. Again, like physical and psychic, but you know, like the I know like broken tiles in like a kitchen floor or like a creaky step, a wall that's like has a scuff on it or something, you know, half done repair, stuff like that. These sort of like traces of time that like sort of just accumulate on a physical space as you live in it, you know. I think I really like love those sort of like yeah, those like just traces we leave behind on these things. And just like, okay, yeah, like again, like what would these, how would these spaces, how would these spaces talk to you? And I am, you know, so there's like this film is kind of part of like I guess a cinematic universe, if you will, of like films of mine that have like there's this like background sort of thing. There's this like throughout the film there's these like radio broadcasts of the like of the um radio announcer, DJ, whatever. He's talking about this like these like giant things called the Titans. And there's another film I did right after this one called Before I Let Go that was about these same giant monsters and how they leveled this black neighborhood. That's sort of just like a proxy for Columbus. And so this is happening like kind of concurrently with that. But in that film, I'm asking, there's like a scripted portion and there's these like unscripted interviews I did with different members in the community. And I'm asking them to walk me through interior spaces that they love that don't exist anymore for whatever reason. And so we're kind of like going through both like the memories there, but also like the physical floor plan of these places too. And so I was also kind of doing that for myself as I was like working on this project. I was going through the floor plan of the house. I was like sort of recounting steps in there in my brain. And it was sort of like amplified because I wasn't like physically able to like access the house for because I was not in the same city anymore. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think I guess, yeah, just trying to hold this like, so like there's this like, I believe I make work about all this stuff, like the portable memories, carrying the home with you, all these things, because like that is sort of how I've had to live my life. Like by nature of being like an artist, I have to travel kind of a lot. And so like I'm always carrying uh my home, my many like several homes with me as I go. And so like I'm as much as like I'm making it in the work, like I'm also like it's also like reassuring me that like this is actually what I feel in practice as well, I guess. As much as in theory and in practice, I guess. I don't know. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, we got questions in the chat too.
Got question.
But thank you.
Chat. Okay. Jordan Alexander would like to know, chat. Could each of you subscribe a feeling to the city of Cleveland as its own dreamscape slash consciousness slash film? Whether that feeling is a word, a scene, memory, or an image.
I got one. That is actually like the heart of my photography series, Vapor Belt, which is bringing vaporwave to the Rust Belt. Um, I very much love Cleveland and the Midwest and all that it means, and I think it is beautiful in its Rust Belt, hardworking, working class. We gonna wake up and go to work on Monday type energy. Um, and so like yeah, I did a project released a project last fall called The Forest. It is like a short story and an audiobook, and it's about a like parallel dimension Cleveland that is split north and south rather than east and west. And and like every therein is like it's all of my like Twilight Zone thoughts are just being poured into that of like living in a place that has such rich history and bones and art and also the deepest form of clinical depression a city could possibly have. And like those two things is like I don't know if I'm empathetic to it or just used to it because that's what I grew up in. But like, yeah, Vapor Belt is like where that's the name I gave that feeling of like bringing something just beautiful and ethereal and kind of retro and otherworldly of like vaporwave, that aesthetic that's and bringing that to like what is like real and like gritty and like surviving of the Rust Belt. So that's my answer.
Would anyone else like to answer that question?
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think for me, like obviously like the shoreline, thinking about that a lot and the whole, the 20. Oh, wait, did I freeze? Uh-oh. Oh no, okay. I forgot my bad. Um, Everyone looked very still for a second.
We're super locked in right now.
But yeah, I'm thinking about the shoreline, the Toni Morrison, like you see the horizon trying to reach for it. Um, Knowing that like it's just like something else is like just over there. I think, it's a city state of dreamers, of hustlers. It's people that like are trying to get a lot of people are trying to get somewhere else, but I think for me, pushing up against that and like seeing how much is just like right here and how rich being just here is. Um, and yeah, so yeah, I mean, like I think it's the shoreline, it's the sky, it's that like really vast. horizon, kind of like that, almost like limitless in a way. Like you see the limit and then you go beyond it. Like that's what I really like feel when I think of Cleveland, when I think of the Midwest, when I think of Ohio.
Beautiful. So we have another question. Oh, or Mr. Banks, were you about to answer that one?
Well, I don't want to hold you guys up, but no, basically,
sure.
but what Cameron just said, and actually what Jasmine said, well, two things. One, everything you guys just said, that's my movie Paper Shadows. That's exactly what the film is. It's about that. Everything you just said there. And it's funny, he talked about the horizon. People that know me personally know that I have an obsession with the shoreline and the sunset. And a lot of my photography and a lot of my films, there's going to be some reference to the sunset, the time of the season, and all that. I mean, if we had an hour, I could talk about that topic alone because that's like one of my passions. But yeah, no, it's the same thing. I mean, Cleveland, no matter how you slice it, that's just what we do. Every aspect of it, in terms of the nature of the season or the climate. If it's before or after or sporting, basketball season, whatever. It's just all these different things. Parades, there's all these elements of our Rust Belt mentality, the blue collar thing, our health, all the hospitals and whatnot, and all the education. It's just all these elements, every other block, every other neighborhood, leading towards the lake and to the salt mines and the coal mines, and before and after ODOT shoved the streets. It's just all these things along with adapting to that. That's every concept of ideology and everything that I storyboard, write, script out, shoot, how I manipulate the post-production. That's all Cleveland. So yeah, but Paper Shadows, the film that I made, it's basically that. And ironically, I have a short film that's been pending for 7 years. It's called Vapor. it's a short though, and it's very similar to what you're talking about, but different perspective, but very similar to this whole topic here. So yeah. And a quick dumb question from Cameron. There's a guy in Columbus, and I can't remember his name. He's a filmmaker. He was known for making goofy movies that were commentaries, but they were disguised as B movies. He did a film called Return of the Giant Termites. And it's not about giant termites. It's a monster movie, but it's not a monster movie. It's about a family, and the father is obsessed with stopping the next termite invasion, but he has a daughter that's in an interracial relationship with a scientist who's Asian, and he has a son who's a Marine who's he's engaged to a person's trans, but he's acting like it's a woman, and it's a Black woman, but it's actually a man who's transitioned. And the movie's really about that disguised as a B monster movie, because there are really no monsters. But throughout the whole film, he's trying to get his son motivated because he knows his son's a Marine, he's American, and they're extreme right wing. It's a crazy funny movie, but I forgot it was a Columbus film though, and it came out like maybe 20 years ago. And if I can think of his name, I'll let you know. But it was called Return of the Giant Termites, but it was basically a dark comedy. But anyway, but yeah. So next question. I just wanted to bring that up when you mentioned about the giant monsters in the Black neighborhood.
Right. I'm gonna have to tap in. I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, I'll find that he's a Columbus filmmaker. He's made some really cool films, but this film was crazy.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's Return of the Giant Termites.
Whoa. Now I have to look that up too. I want to see that. Are you okay? Me. Our next question says, I'd love to hear you all talk about your editing process. What do you edit on? Do you use found footage? And how do you approach editing generally? I'm thinking about the text in Robert's film and a lot of the overlay in camera. So I think anyone.
Okay, me? Okay. Okay, those two films in particular, those were all done traditional cut and splice. X the Baby Cinema was 16 millimeter, and literally it was before I had a flatbed machine or a Moviola. It was strictly an editing bench with 2 rewinds and a splicer, and cut and splice. I would take the rough cut, run it through a projector, watch it, take notes, time it, go back. So it was very primitive how I did that one, but I pulled that off. The optical effects, a lot of that was done in camera. It was like in camera optical printing that I did. And yeah, Bolex camera is good for that. And that took some time. I went through like maybe 6,000 feet of film before I got it right. But overall, yeah, that's pretty much how I did that. Very basic, traditional optical manipulation. Motion picture genocide. same thing. That was all, once again, cut and spliced. That was my Motion Picture Genocide was my first color 35mm film. The one before that was the film I did on Dexter Davis, which didn't get to finish till later, but but MPG was the first one that I actually did. And same thing, I had a hot splicer that was, very basic. Everything was pre-measured. I had to count the frames by hand, measure the frames. I timed everything out, and I just rhythmically had a system. And yeah, you cut and splice, you measure it. The painting on the film, same thing. I had 1,000 feet of clear leader that I actually was using. That film took me a year to make, I should mention, in terms of the compiling the sounds, which were sounds I recorded off of old VHS tapes, and then literally painting on the film, layering the film. There were old school optical effects, rear projection, front projection, stuff that you can do with After Effects and everything within a few minutes. It took me like 5 days just to do one segment. So, but yeah, I was on a train in New York for a screening of one of my features, actually, my documentary. And on the Amtrak train, I had a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle light box with batteries in it. And I was on the train painting on film, and everybody was watching me do that. And it was really weird, but it was funny because people were like, what is he doing? But that's how that film got made. And literally the soundtrack, once it was done, it was pre-mixed on a cassette deck. And then we took that to my friend who's passed away, sadly, and I have his equipment now. He had a magnetic recording machine, a dubber, for recording magnetic audio, and the sound was transferred to that. Went back and manually matched it, synced it on the flatbed that I eventually bought from him, and that's how that works. So that was strictly traditional cut and splice, no digital, no Final Cut Pro, no Avid, no Premiere. It was strictly cut and splice. Yep. And it was definitely disciplinary, but that's, the majority of the films I've made were made that way. There's only been every so often I would do something digitally in terms of my own stuff. But yeah. Next.
Cool. Yeah, sure. Let's move to the next question. And we also just dropped our exit survey in the chat. I think the permissions might need to be fixed, so I'll fix that in a moment, but I know people are gonna hop off soon, but I just want to make sure we get through all these really great questions. Our next question says, who were the other filmmakers that you mentioned, Mr. Banks? You said that some were more relevant to your work than Stan Breakage. Oh, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, let me say that again. Yeah, no, those filmmakers that really inspired me in terms of this type of filmmaking in particular, it was Norman McLaren. He was a Scottish Canadian animator, and he was a protege of Lin Lai, who was doing this stuff way back in the 30s. And yeah, what made McLaren, as opposed to, people keep thinking Stan Brakhage, which is, like I said, I like Brakhage, but that didn't really inspire me. McLaren made films that were commentaries. He made a lot of commentaries, especially in the 40s and the 50s, that really blew me away. And I was exposed to that stuff when I was in high school, when he made those films. But that film, his films had a big impact. He had a film called Neighbors that was all pixelated. Hin Hop. There was a bunch of shorts that he made, and a lot of them were painting and drawing on films. And he actually built a rig to optically paint on the film precisely. And so I had to jerry rig things like that. Another filmmaker I want to mention that was a big inspiration, two of them actually, for X to Baby cinema. One was Frank Morris, who's an amazing filmmaker. If you guys don't know him, he did a film called Frank Film back in 72 or 73. And he had like a couple of 100,000 cutouts for that. And it was all audio collage along with it. And he won an Oscar. That's probably one of the few experimental films that win an Oscar. And ironically, we're Facebook friends now. And it's like, he's one of the few heroes that he's a cool guy and I love him. But yeah, he was a huge inspiration. I saw that in high school. And believe it or not, Gordon Parks. If you guys haven't seen it, Gordon Parks did a ballet on Martin Luther King. It was called Martin. And the ballet was really good. But the high point of the film for me was the opening. There was a huge montage using his photography and using newsreel footage. And it was like an iconographic overlay with this extreme crazy montage. And Gordon Parks did the soundtrack himself. He's all self-taught, big inspiration. And that was the film that really pushed me to go that route when I did for X to Baby Cinema, because that came out in February of 1990, I believe it was, or around, it was either Black History Month or maybe during Martin's birthday. Anyways, Martin Luther King. But that film, if you can find it, for some reason it was unavailable. It's finally on YouTube now, but for years I couldn't find that. But luckily, I recorded it the night it aired back in 1990, and I remember seeing that, and I just figured I want to do something like this, but maybe a little more crazier. But yeah, Gordon Parks, big time. So, but yeah, but Norman McLaren, Harry Smith is another one, Lynn Lai, and Jordan Belzen's another filmmaker that I've admired. And once again, these are people that pretty much do more non-linear, but definitely more abstract collage animation and a lot of cerebral type stuff, but there's still somewhat of a structure to it. And you can say that about Brackets too, but these are the guys that really just, I love their work. And Mary Ellen Butte, she's another one that I like also. Yeah.
Those are great resources. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And our last question can go to everyone, but it was directed specifically at Mr. Banks. Your work often blends experimental techniques with raw social commentary. How do you balance artistic experimentation with the need to communicate a clear message to your audience? So I feel like that question, that'll be our closing question. And if each filmmaker wants to answer that, you are more than welcome.
Ooh, oh, when we go, okay. For me personally, I mean, once again, I don't consider myself a scholar or nothing like that, or an activist. And I guess in many ways, if you're an artist, you are an activist. So, or whether, you know, because there's something that you want to say it a certain way, but you want to also say it in a way that's going to really make it engaging. And I guess for me personally, it's just, I like having fun making films. And I think you guys probably like doing it also. We want to enjoy ourselves. And some of us do want to go the extra mile to do something that's going to really stick out. And we want to, you know, get down and dirty, but still at the same time, we want to make sure whatever is going to be said sticks with you. And I think that's the initial goal for a lot of non-traditional, more experimental type filmmakers. You know, you want to enlighten people with an aesthetic, but you want to definitely engage them with the poetic nature of what you're trying to say with your theme or whatever. And there's always that thin line, because there's been times when I had a good technical idea, but I didn't really have nothing to really utilize it in terms of what I want to say, or I have something I want to say, but how do I want to express it without it being boring and generic, you know? So, because I have a lot of friends that make a lot of radical films, but they're just very straightforward, and they don't really think about what is the person going to walk away with, you know. So, and a lot of this is from watching a lot of, you know, B movies and stuff, or all these movies that I saw as a kid on Saturday afternoons. You can there's so many filmmakers that would take those kind of films and they would re-edit them and make them into something now. And now everybody does that on YouTube or whatnot. And I just thought, you know, if anything, I want to make something fresh, real, original, but at the same time, you know, I really want there to be some level of entertainment to go with that. But there's no reason why you can't really push the envelope, so to speak. And the fact you're taking a basic fundamental tool or medium and doing something that would be not practical, that makes it all the more challenging and fun too. So whether you're doing narratives or more documentary, or, you know, or just nonlinear. So yeah, I mean, for me, there's that thin line, because there's so many people that get caught up in the technical and they get more excited about that as opposed to the message. And it can go both ways. So you just got to try and keep it steady and look at it and just be like, wow, okay, maybe this is going to say more than what I expected, you know, or maybe not saying it enough.
Similar to that, I think for me, I'm very much following a feeling. I feel like I want to be honest about whatever the story I'm trying to tell is, whatever the themes are, whatever I'm trying to express. And so sometimes that honesty may, you know, be wordy or maybe isn't immediately accessible on the surface, but I know I can hit a feeling that can resonate and is universal. I know I can hit that instinct or that quiet knowing, and let that be the throw line that communicates. Because if it really hits, you'll come back to the work. If it really hits, you'll come back and want to watch it again. You'll want to process it again. And I think about, even as a kid, I think this is the thing that really helps me. I think about all the things I was such a fan of when I was like really too young to really understand it. but like it resonated and stayed with me. And so as I got older, I went back to it and I'm like, oh, I can see with fresh eyes. And actually, 10-year-old Jasmine had taste. She just didn't know what all those big words meant. Like, but the takeaway is still the same feeling. And I think that to me is really important, that like, that's where I didn't come from a family that made art. I didn't very much came from a working class, like we're going to work on Monday type family. And so the way I connected to art in the world, or the way I felt seen in these spaces, whether it was on traditional television or in museums and galleries, was in whatever could hit that intuitive feeling space. And then I would be drawn to whatever the bigger context or whatever words were escaping me in that moment. So I think that's my North Star. It's like, if I can hit that feeling, then I'm not trying to, I really don't want to ever alienate my audience. I want to approach them honestly, but I never want to make them feel like you're stupid for being here, or you're not getting it. It's too deep for you type shit. No, it's this energy is here and you feel it and it's real. And I'm expressing it this way, and maybe we can meet in the middle in the theater. That's kind of, yeah.
Love that. Let's meet in the theater and get it together. Wow. Really good stuff. Thank you all for coming, engaging, discoursing in the respite. As you can see here on the screen, we have social media. If you liked it, if you saw the vision, you can follow us on Instagram at within.digital_. If you want to read some essays, check out some links to some archived chats. You can visit our website, withindigital.net, which might lead you to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@withindigital, within.digital. You can see on the thing. I also dropped this in the chat. We have a Substack as well that you can subscribe to, withindigital.substack.com. We also have Cash App, which is $within digital, if you'd like to send some donations. And that's about it. Check out our Spotify. We have a playlist. Connect with us. Thanks for coming. Candace.
Yes, thank you all so much. Thank you for this amazing conversation. Can we just shout out our panelists before everyone hops off? Just want to say thank you, and we will let the music play us out. And yeah, this is really, really awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting this.
Yeah, thank you so much, y'all. This was really great. I feel like I really needed this tonight. This was good.
Yeah, let's do this again sometime, you guys.
Yes.
I would love that.
And the respite.
In the respite.
Bigger things await. Happy year of the snake.
Happy year of the snake.